Hi guys, and welcome to A Dog's Soul, an empath's guide to your dog's feelings. Today, we're going to talk about 10 things you should never do while training your dog. So stay tuned and have fun. Alright, so the following 10 things are the perfect way to get you in trouble with your dog. It doesn't have to be anything dangerous. It just makes training less fun, less enjoyable. Your dog will want to participate less, and it's way harder. So here goes. Number 1, start without a plan. This might sound ridiculous because it's only dog training, right? But if you get in your car and start driving and you don't have a goal, you will end up nowhere. And it's the same thing with your dog. If you don't know where you're going with your training, it will be pointless. So be absolutely sure what you want with your dog and what you want to reach with your training. And that goal can change over time, it's no worries, but you have to start somewhere. And this has to be something that you can actually visualize. So it has to be worded positively. And no, this is not some kind of positive only dog trainer mumbo jumbo. It is just how our brains work. It's the same thing as if I would say, don't think about the pink elephant. What are you thinking about? Our brains do not understand no. So, your goals have to be something you can actually reach and something you can actually do. So, an example would be, I want my dog to look at me whenever he sees another dog and stay calm while we walk past. Something like this. So this is something that sometimes takes a little practice and sometimes even help because we're so stuck in our negative thinking and our I want this to stop that it needs us to have a mindset change. And that can be scary. But it absolutely helps, and it is a complete game changer if we know what we want from our dogs, because then we can teach them what we want, right? And it puts us in a better mood because we're thinking about something positive. And that's point number 2. Start when you're in a bad mood. Never do that. Never do that. If you want to be really consistent, but you're in a bad mood, do something else first. Whatever helps you get in a better mood. Play with your dog, watch a funny TV show, read a great book, do a meditation, watch a funny YouTube video, whatever. Do something that gets you in a better mood. Or take the day off. Every training needs some time off to work. So, when you're in a bad mood anyway, wouldn't that be just an awesome opportunity to take your dog somewhere where you can just relax together, have fun together, and not worry about anything your dog could do that is annoying or embarrassing or whatever. And that can recharge both your batteries, which is a great thing, right? And it sets the tone for the next training session. So you will be more motivated, your dog will be more motivated, and it will work faster. And that brings us to point number 3. Work on something you don't really need. So many of my clients have told me what the dog knows already. He's really obedient because we've done our obedience training. And whenever you participate a little bit in Facebook groups, the first thing that gets recommended, especially in puppies, is do basic obedience. And while this can be a fun thing to do, most of these basic things are really outdated and you never need them. Like, in all of my years with dogs now, I have never needed a verbal down command. Never. Or a heel, for that matter. Never. Yes, I need my dog to walk on a loose leash, but he does not have to stay glued to my thigh and looking at me in a heel position. This is something that will never be necessary in day-to-day life. And yes, never say never. There may be some kind of situation where it can be helpful, but there are always a gazillion other things that work way better. And some of these are even trained in a not so nice way. I'm thinking about a leave it, for example. We don't need a leave it. We will never need a leave it. We can just use a look at me. It's the same thing. But the difference is, as we discovered in point 1, we need a positive wording, and a leave it does not do that. A look at me does. So it's the better choice. Anyway, pick and choose what you really need and what you should prioritize with your dog. If your dog is going crazy on leash outside when he sees another dog or a person or trash can, whatever, you need to work on that. You don't need to work on a sit, stay, whatever. You need to work on the reactivity. And that doesn't mean that you can never work on a sit, stay with some kind of search game. And this is awesome for downtime, but it's not a priority. Or if you have a newly adopted puppy and you are planning out what you need to do, the most important thing is to get your puppy accustomed to different things in the environment, to different situations, so he will grow up as a very confident and very relaxed dog. That's what we want in our daily lives. He can learn a sit with 10 years old as well. So this is not a priority. Getting him used to different situations and getting him comfortable in various situations he will need later in life, that's a priority. Or house training. That's another thing, right? So pick and choose what you need to do first. And then you need the right way to do it. Which brings us to point number 4. Try to do it without treats. I have heard the funniest explanations for that, but what it comes down to is we are worried that the dogs don't do what we ask when we don't have treats on us. And this is just a training mistake. The solution is not to stay away from treats, because that would make things a lot harder. Treats are the easiest reward we can use, not necessarily for our dogs, but for ourselves. So if we want to stay away from treats, we are making things unnecessarily hard for us. Because what we would have to use done is environmental rewards, so things the dog would like to do in the situation. And seeing that is a bit of a challenge, and always having that on hand is an even bigger challenge. So I would always recommend working with treats. And no, it doesn't have to be the only thing, and it shouldn't be the only thing. But staying away from it completely is, again, unnecessarily hard. And as for that training mistake, where our dogs only do things when we have treats on us, we can specifically work on us not having treats on us, but still rewarding with a treat. It's not that hard. You can just have your treat somewhere in your house and ask your dog to do something. And when he does, you mark and you invite him very joyfully to come with you and get a treat. And then you go to wherever the treats are and give him a treat. It's really something that can be a lot of fun. And watching the dog just being surprised by that invitation is really awesome. So this is no big deal. All right. And if you run out of treats when you're on a walk or in a training session, it is useful if your dog knows that sometimes he gets rewarded differently. So this is where we don't rely only on treats, but we can also use the environment and what our dogs like to do. Again, this is more tricky and more advanced, but it's a great way to surprise our dogs and to keep them motivated. All right. What doesn't keep them motivated is mistake number 5, use corrections. Corrections are not only unnecessary, they eat away the trust we have built up with our dogs every single time we use them. So, the question here is, what is more important to you? Your dog's well-being or your dog functioning like a machine? If it's the first one, you don't need corrections. If it's the second one, it is okay for you to go over your dog's threshold. Your dog's emotions and feelings do not matter to you. The only thing that matters is performance. And then you might need corrections. But since you're here listening to that, I would almost be willing to bet that your dog's emotions, your dog's well-being is important to you. And then you don't need corrections. And if you're not sure how to work on something without corrections, go to the description, book a free call. We see how it can help. Or if that doesn't work for you, choose a positive reinforcement-based trainer that can help you with that. Almost all of us are specialized on something. And for example, I don't do hunting behavior, but I know a great colleague who does. So there is always somebody who can help if you're not sure. But what has to change is your mindset. It is a decision we can make whether we want to go over our dogs and use corrections to do so, or if we put our dog's well-being first and find a way to ensure that while training. And it's much more fun. I guarantee you that. It's much more fun to train without corrections than with them. And if we want to keep the fun, we have to watch out for things that are uncomfortable for either us or our dogs. And mistake number 6 is such a thing. Touch your dog's face. I know it sounds weird because why should you touch your dog's face, right? But I'm thinking back, and I think except one, all of my clients did that in training sessions. It's something we do as primates. It's natural to us, and we want to smush that little doggy face, and we want to tell him that we love him. And for us, this is really rewarding because we get to touch soft fur and they are so adorable. But for our dogs, not so much. And I have seen more than once that a dog who gets touched in the face stops what we wanted to reward completely. Like, if we talk about something really basic like a recall, we want our dogs to come when we call in the fastest way possible and with a huge smile on their faces, right? So we teach them that recall is something really great. And very often when the recall stops working, it's because the people switch from giving treats to touching the dog's face and petting him on the head or something like that. And the dog really is so uncomfortable with that he stops a behavior, even when it was rewarded very highly before, immediately. So this is a sign of how uncomfortable this is for our dogs. And that's why we should really learn to control our hands in training. We want our dogs to feel good when we do stuff with them, right? And that's why it's so important to really get a grip. Right. And when these things become a bit difficult, or when we do not understand why our dogs don't do what we ask, we can get frustrated. And that's mistake number 7. Get frustrated. Avoid that. No. It's really important that we have fun training as well, because otherwise we will start adding some pressure, and even if we don't want to, but it will happen to us, and our dogs feel that, and that makes the whole situation really less enjoyable. And that's why when we start feeling frustrated with something, it's probably because we're either asking too much of our dogs or we don't really have a good plan. So what we need to do is stop the training session and assess what's going wrong. What's the issue? Maybe our dog is just not feeling well, or maybe we chose an environment that is too distracting for our dog to practice this new thing we wanted to teach him. Or our dog stopped doing what we wanted because we added something that is uncomfortable for them, like touching their face, something like that. And if we don't stop, it can lead us to mistake number 8, and now it gets serious. Get angry. If we don't stop at frustrated, we will get angry. And if we get angry, you already guessed it, our decision making is a little off, right? So whenever we are not our best selves, we tend to ask too much of our dogs. We tend to get a little rough. We tend to not explain things better, but worse. And that's why this is the last possible moment where we have to stop. If we feel anger rising, we have to stop. And again, assess why it's going badly and maybe it's just a bad day and maybe we just need to do something fun together and start again tomorrow, right? There is no need to push through. Neither when we see ourselves get stuck or emotions rising, nor when we see our dogs having trouble with the whole situation. And that's mistake number 9. Overwhelm your dog. That can happen when our sessions are too long. It can happen when they are too difficult. Or it can happen very suddenly when something happens unexpectedly. Like we are working on leash reactivity, we have enough distance, and we are working with a fenced-in dog park. So we can control the distance, our dog is fine, everything's okay. And then suddenly an off-leash dog crashes into us. Worst case scenario, right? And that's an immediate overwhelm for our dog. This is something we cannot control. And sometimes it happens. We can brush it off and see if our dog is still able to work on whatever we were working on and maybe do some easier repetitions and get some positive emotions back in, or we stop for the day or the session. But there are things we can control, like the length of our training session. If we work our dogs too long, for one thing, they start losing precision. So they get sloppier and sloppier and sloppier until we can only reward behavior that is half as good as it was in the beginning. And our dog learns that he only has to do this half as good, what we don't want, right? We want the best results we can get. Or we make it too difficult. Like if we have a fearful dog and we don't start with one person that is not too scary and sitting down and our dogs can just look at that person and be relaxed, but we go to a big city and just try to waltz around where there are hundreds of people busy, so also running around in many different directions, and everything's loud and everything's very smelly and there are so many things going on. This is system overload. And it cannot be a good experience for our dog. It's like when we are overwhelmed by workload. I don't know what you're working, but it sometimes happens for a lot of us that too many things come up at once and we get overwhelmed. It's not comfortable. It's not a good feeling. And we do not want our dogs to feel this way about us. That's why we keep the training sessions short. We keep them difficult enough for our dogs to learn, but not too difficult so they get overwhelmed. And for every training session, there is one more very important thing, and that brings us to mistake number 10. Forget the ending. It's like if you're watching a movie or reading a book and it stops abruptly. It has a complete open end and it stops in the middle of a word. This is really frustrating. It leaves us hanging. And we know as humans that, especially in sports, we need a warm-up and a cool-down. And this doesn't only apply to dog sports, it also applies to every training session. If we stop abruptly, it leaves the dog with nothing. And very often the dogs show us that they don't really know what to do now. And this is again uncomfortable. So we need an ending. What we can do is give our dogs some kind of relaxation. Some dogs like to relax together. Then we can do a massage or Tellington or whatever our dogs like. But some dogs don't like that kind of relaxation after working. So they prefer something to do on their own, like chewing, like licking, like shredding stuff. And this is also a great way to end a training session. And it can be as easy as a scattered treats thing, where the dog can just pick up treats. It just has to end some way, and it has to end with relaxation. And sometimes our dogs need to learn how to relax before we start a training session so that we can end with relaxation. All right? Because a dog who cannot relax tends to get in trouble at some point in his life. So we need our dogs to be able to relax anyway. And this might be what is most important for you and your dog. For many of my clients, it is. And we really start with relaxation and getting the stress level down and things like that, while starting training for the most important thing that they have at the moment. Why don't you tell me in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or write me an email if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, what your number one priority with your dog is right now. I would love to read those, and I will get back to every single one of them. Maybe I can add something helpful. Right? And don't forget to like and subscribe, and share the episode with someone where you have seen one or two of these mistakes, or who you think will benefit from learning about these to create training sessions that are awesome, fun, and give us great results. Have fun training. Until next time. Bye.